Okay, in this video we're going to learn how to use relative references. And to demonstrate how to use relative references when recording macros, I'm going to show you how to just do a list of days of the week across the top of your spreadsheet. And we'll do it one way using relative references, and we'll do it one way without, so you can see the difference. Okay? And when we're talking about relative references, we're talking about this little button right up here under your coding section. And you can see if I don't click on that, it's normal. But if I click on it, now it's highlighted in gray. And that means it's activated. Okay? So we're going to start with it off. And we're going to first record a macro that has absolute references, so you can see how that behaves. And then we're going to record a macro using relative references to see how that behaves. When you're recording a macro with absolute references, with this not selected, it doesn't matter where you start when you're recording, but it does matter where you first click after you start recording. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click record and name this. We're just going to name this days of week absolute. Okay, we'll hit enter, and now we're recording. So if we want to start our list or our headlines of days of the week in cell B3, we're going to click into that cell. That's going to tell the macro that we want to start absolutely in cell B3, and now we can put in our steps. So we're just going to say Sunday, hit tab, Monday, highlight those two, and we're going to use autofill to drag them across through Saturday. Okay? Then we can do some quick formatting. We're going to auto fit the width of the column, so we're going to say Alt HOI. See how that auto fit the width of the columns, and then we're going to say Control B to make them all bold. Okay? And that's it for our absolute cell reference macro. We'll go to Developer, click Stop Recording, and now if we go to a new sheet, we can select any cell, and we can go run our macro, select our days of the week absolute, and click Run. And it's going to drop it in B3, and it's going to stay there. Okay? Let's just clear all of that. And let's select right in the same cell. Go to Developer, Macro, run our macro. And you see, no matter whether we're selected down here or we're selected right here, it's always going to jump right to that absolute cell reference of B3 and put your list right in there. Okay? So that's the one way to do it. Now let's talk about what it looks like if we use a relative reference. Okay? I'm just going to delete this. And I'll go ahead and delete these columns just to clean this up, and we'll start from scratch. Okay, with a relative reference, you want to be specific about where you're starting, because wherever you go from there, your macro is going to move that number of cells. So we're going to click in the upper left-hand corner, but ultimately we want to put our days of the week starting in B3 again. But we're going to start here. We're going to select Use Relative Cell References. We're going to say Record Macro, and we're going to say Days of Week relative. Okay, hit enter. Now we're recording, and we're going to use the arrow keys to go 1 to the right and 1, 2 down. So what we've just told Excel to do is from wherever our cursor starts or wherever our selected cell is at the beginning of the macro, move 1 to the right and 2 down. So you'll notice if we start our selection when we run our macro at G8, then it's still going to move 1 to the right and 2 down. Okay, whereas our absolute cell reference always jumped back up here. Okay, so let's try it. We're selected in the cell. I'm going to do the same thing. Type Sunday, tab, Monday. Select both of them, drag them over, and use autofill. And then we'll adjust our column width again, Alt, H, O, I, and then do bold, Control B, and we're finished. Go to our developer tab, say stop recording, and I'm going to turn this off just so I don't forget later. And then we'll go to a new sheet. And first let's start with the cursor right here in A1. And we'll go to macros, and we'll go to days of the week relative and run it. And you see, since we're started there, it went 1 to the right and 2 down. Now let's go ahead and clear all of that. Actually, let's just delete these cells to clear all the formatting and everything. There we go. Okay, now let's start with our cursor here at well, let's do E1. Go to developer, go to days of the week relative, and run. So you notice we started in E1 and it went 1 to the right and 2 down. So now our list is over here. So can you see how this one little toggle button will make a difference in how your macro performs, whether you're going to have it locked into one spot or kind of respond to wherever you initially place the cursor. So let me show you a more robust example of that. Let's just delete this. And we're gonna, delete this one. Just clean this up a little bit. Okay, now let's go to sheet 1 here. You probably recognize this fairly well. This is our sales rep spreadsheet, and it has the months January through December, has some spark lines, has our sales reps, and all of their sales for each month. Okay, so what I've done in this other sheet over here is I've just expanded this out a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the macro recorder, and we're going to use relative references and absolute references to create a formula to do totals all the way down the side over here. Okay? And the cool thing about this is that if we were just to record a macro that said total over here, and then we put a formula for the sum of these numbers and put it in here, and then we tried to copy it down and paste it, when we tried to run that macro somewhere else, for instance, if we ran that macro on this spreadsheet, even though it has the same number of columns, it has a different number of rows. So if we tried to run that macro, what it would do then is it would paste that formula all the way down to, let's see, how many rows do we have here? Row 14. It would go all the way down to row 14, and you'd have formulas in here, and it would cause a mess. Or if we had a similar table like this that had 100 sales reps, when we went to run our macro, it would only calculate the totals for those first 14 because it's not connected to the size of the table or range. It's just using absolute references to go down 14 spaces and paste the formulas. So let's go ahead and get into this, and I'll show you how it works. Now the first thing I'm going to do with this is change it from a table to a range, because the way that it references cells in a table makes this macro not work. But if we have it in a range, then it will work just fine. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and select on that. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Design first, and we're going to change the formatting back to None so that it doesn't get stuck with any of that formatting. And then we're going to go Convert to Range. It asks if we want to convert it to a normal range. We're going to say yes. Okay. This is just to simplify it so our macro doesn't get messed up. Okay. So we're going to go back to our Developer tab. And it doesn't really matter where I'm clicked initially, but I'm going to go to Record Macro. Let's call this Sales Rep Totals. Click OK. And then we're going to go click up into cell O1. So that's now an absolute reference. We've told Excel to go exactly to cell O1. And we can start. We're going to type total. And then we're going to hit Control Enter so we stay in the same cell. And now we're going to say Control B to bold that. You can do any kind of formatting. This is just as an example. I'm going to go over to Home and I'm going to center it. And that's fine for the formatting. Then we're going to hit Enter. That's also going to select absolutely cell O2. Now we're going to put in our formula. I'm going to say equals sum, tab to select it, and I'm going to select this range. Or you could type in the numbers, of course. Just enter your formula normally, but we're going to say Control Enter again so we select the same cell, or so we stay selected within cell O2. And then we're going to copy our formula. We're going to say Control C, and we're going to use the arrow key to travel over to our range. And then the sneaky part here is we're going to say Control and down arrow. So instead of telling Excel to go to M10, we've just told Excel to go to the end of the range. So if we have 24 entries, it's going to go all the way down to M24. If we have 100 entries, it's going to go all the way down to M100, and so on. But we've basically tricked the recorder into going to the bottom cell in the range rather than a specific cell number. Okay? Now we're going to go to the Developer tab. We're going to say Use Relative References. And now, instead of telling it to go exactly to cell O10, we're just going to tell it to go to a relative reference, which is 2 spots to the right of the bottom of the range. Okay? So that allows it to be flexible. Now we're going to press Control Shift up arrow to go select all the way to the top, and Control V to paste our formula in there. And we can just hit Enter to finish it up, and our macro is ready. Now we can go stop recording, and we can go ahead and delete this here, and then we'll run it here, and then we'll run it over on the other one as well. Okay, so let's select just anywhere. We'll go to macros, and we'll go to sales rep totals, and we'll hit run. And I should have probably had it adjust the column widths, but that's easy enough to do. But you can see it's plopped in the word total, and it's copied this formula. It's created this formula, a sum formula, and it's copied it all the way down to the bottom of our range. So let's go try it on our bigger range and see if it works. So we go to here. This one's still formatted as a table, but it's not going to make any difference. If you run it on a table, that's fine. You just can't record it on a table. That's just where the issue comes from. So we'll just click anywhere. Go to our macros, we'll go to sales rep totals and click run. And again, I have to open that up, but you can see it adjusted the height. This one's shorter, this one's longer, but our macro worked just fine to go down to the bottom of the range, go over and paste our formulas for our sum function through all of our sales reps. Okay, so that's the basics of using relative references versus absolute references, and kind of how to combine them to get the macro recorder to do what you want to do. And we demonstrated that first by looking at our days of the week macro, where we just put in the headlines for Sunday through Saturday, and then we finished up by creating some formulas, total formulas for some sales reps.